Hey, and welcome to a ginormous edition of Then and Now. This is a bit of a passion project for me. I wanted to do something on Fireball Island for a while. I just haven't thematically found a way to fit it in, and I couldn't think of a more perfect way to do it than this new Then and Now feature we have. These boxes, these board games are huge, so I'm not going to be able to do a 360 for you guys on any of these, so we'll just be showing you some things up close, so I apologize in advance that the camera's a little bit shaky, but I'll do my best to stabilize that. I want to start out with where it all began, back in 1986. We have this amazing box art from Milton Bradley, of all hand-drawn, of showing this great adventure sequence on this game. We had a lot of gimmicky games in the 80s and 90s. Everything had to stand out and compete with itself, going beyond the flat board game. This was a three-dimensional board game, which was still pretty awesome for the time. Not a lot of other three-dimensional games like this, and it just had so much dynamic gameplay to it. It was just very memorable, and it just kind of stuck with you throughout your childhood. And I love this box. I'm glad I kept it. It's great artwork on the front here, and then of course on the back you see this great display here of the game on this little desert island with the call-outs of Volcar and everything else in the game, which we'll get to in a minute. But beautiful, beautiful box. Absolutely love this. It's just gorgeous. They did a great job with this at the time. I think it holds up till today. So just amazing design to it. And then we have Fireball Island by Restoration Games. This was a Kickstarter. I'm not sure what year the Kickstarting started on this, but then it started hitting store shelves around 2018. Close to a 30-year, a little more than a 30-year gap on that one. But still captured a lot of the same elements to it, and we'll get to it in a minute. A lot of the same locations and aspects to it. Gameplay changed a little bit. We'll get to that as well. But the box art, as you can see, they still went with all a hand-drawn look on the front, which I appreciate, because you're getting back to the original sort of art display. A little bit different. You see some new characters on there, a little more detailed than the standard Explorers. And then on the back, you get to see the game itself, and they call out a bunch of different elements here to the gameplay, which we'll get to. I think this is still, this isn't it might be a shot. I don't know. It kind of looks a little hand-drawn too. But we'll get to all the different elements here. But don't be fooled by the size of this box. You might look at it and be like, whoa, this is a much smaller game. It's actually more than twice the size of the original. It's just in a bunch of components here. So we'll have to assemble it briefly, and then I'll show you. And we're just going to focus on the base model. There are other extensions to this as well. You can see them behind me here in a moment. So they had a couple of expansion packs. They had this Last Adventurer sequence that came with a bunch of poison snakes and other marbles to hit you, a giant boulder that would attack you as well as the new character, which was supposed to be one of the pieces from the original that made it into the sequel game. You have this Crouching Tiger, Hidden Bees expansion that was a lot of obviously bees that could sting you, but also some new treasures to collect, and a tiger that could pounce on you and hurt you as well. They added this entire peninsula to the board game that would attach at the top, the northern portion of the island, and it would add a new sequence of play with these spiders that would jump out all over the board, and there'd be other treasures as well. So everything came with new treasure. And then last but not least, they had the Wreck of the Crimson Cutlass, which was a little wreck off the shore of the game that would attach via one of their cave transportation systems, and you guessed it, more treasure. You could have cannonballs fire at you and all sorts of other things. So just building out the island a little bit. Modular, I've said in the other reviews, if you look at my ones of Rebel Scum, modular is the way to go. Allows you to expand things without having to put too much at the front end. So if you just want the base model, you don't have to spend another $100, $200 in buying a whole bunch of expansions. But I think these were great. I'm a huge fan of Fireball Island. They really help expand it. But today we're just going to be focusing on the game, the base game itself. So why don't we start by getting into the original Milton Bradley one and check out what made that game so great. Like I said, this game is very big. It's hard for me to show. I could basically fit all of it in a frame, and then we'll come in closer and I'll give you guys some look at some of the features here. What it came with was you had these 4 Intrepid Explorers here that were your move tokens here. A bunch of these glass marbles that were the fireballs. You had 5 of them, one inside Volcar here. your jewel, which is the object of the game, was to get the jewel and escape. You have these little magic talisman pieces that kept the players from stealing cards from you once you had them, and they were also a fun little home for the jewel. So they were nice that way too, or they could be traded for cards. And then you had a bunch of movable pieces here, like these bridges that could get knocked over by fireballs. And then, of course, you had the end zone here, the dock. So in addition to the gameplay, you had a whole bunch of cards, and I'll give you guys a close-up on these, that would allow you to do different objectives to advance the game, and everything was just kind of controlled by a die here. But this was the board. It was awesome. It had a lot going on, different parts of it, and these fireballs would essentially roll down and knock out your explorers here, depending on where they were. So they could be rolled different ways, and they could take out a lot of people, or they could be rolled in an area like this, and you could see that the way it was grooved would only maintain the distance to a certain area, but you could get them with this one here. So basically the way it worked is, as you rolled, if you ever rolled a 1, you'd have to, the rule was you'd have to roll a fireball. That was fireball, and it would have to be one that hits somebody, even if it was you. So if you can't reach anyone else, you'd have to end up fireballing yourself. There were also other cards to make fireballs occur, or it occurred at special moments, but that's basically the game. It is getting all the way up to this jewel, taking the jewel, and then getting all the way down to the dock across the bridges and being the first one to do that. It's a cat and mouse game, so all the other players would try to steal the jewel from you. And if you got hit by a fireball, you get knocked back to a safe zone. There were certain designated safe zones, and you'd lose the jewel exactly where you got hit, so someone else could come along and scoop it up. And that is basically the thrust of it, but there's a lot more to it. There's some cool things like the cave system. I think you can see one on this side here, where if you landed on a cave and you rolled a die, you could pop out of another cave, taking a shortcut, or end up on the bluffs in the middle of nowhere. I'll show you guys a close-up of that. But that was the gist of the game. It was a lot of fun. It could last for an hour or longer, depending on how many times you get fireballed. But a lot of chase involved in it, a lot of different dynamics, some strategy with the cards you're playing, or choosing to hold on to this to protect people from taking cards from you by cashing out for a couple more cards. Just however you wanted to play the game came into it. But yeah, that is the thrust of the game. It is awesome. I cannot sort of undersell it. It's unfortunate that no one ever made a one-to-one copy of the original. I still think the original is amazing. It's several $100s if you want to complete one on eBay or something. Totally worth it in my opinion. It's a classic. Everyone should have it. But why don't I bring you guys in closer and show you some of the elements and areas here, because they're going to be important as they carry over into the 2018 version. Okay, so here we go with our up-close look at the Fireball Island. I want to start by showing you guys the cards here. You can see there is a lot of different things you could do. Something would stop a fireball. You could take cards away from people. Then there's these move opponent. Now there's different ones. So you could have 2. You could have, let's see, 3. There's 4. I think 5. So there's all different versions of that. Fake jewel keeps people from stealing the jewel from you. So basically you'd give this instead to somebody. This would cancel other players' cards. There's a move ahead 6, 5, 4, 3. This is if you just wanted to fireball someone, you have this card, take another turn, double the next roll, and then re-roll the die. And those were essentially the cards. You typically had 4 in your hand, no more than that. So taking a look over here at the board, you have your starting plateau where you began with your explorer, and you moved along here, which was called the Witch Lord Trail, to the peak here where you'd get this little disc whether you stopped on it or not. Now you saw on the way there's a cave here. When you land in a cave, you'd roll a die, and there's 6 locations. So whatever the roll was, you could pop out at the different spots on the board. You had some over here at the end. You had this one of the bluffs where you were just kind of stuck until your next roll because there's nothing you could do. Or if you wanted to roll up here, and then you end up getting closer to the jewel at Volcar Point. but that was basically the way to move. There's some other little fun spaces that don't really do anything, like the sinkhole. You can't get to it, but I guess if you had a rogue fireball, it would end up over there. Then you had some great little fun details like the snake coming out here. These little spots you see with the rubble, these are sort of the safe zones. After you got hit by a fireball, you would end up your piece would be face down here until it got stood up on the next turn. So there's these little spots all around the board for whenever you get hit by a fireball. And that's basically where your piece would be reset. So you move along here, and then you have the names that translate over to the next game, like Thunder Alley, Skeleton Head Beach. We had these little skeletons here on it, and then you got Fire Flash Shoot over here. So all these little locations will be in the next game as well. So they kind of kept that true to the naming. I love the bridges because as a fireball came down the chute here, it would hit the bridges and it would cause the players to flip over. So if you knock this one here, and your piece would end up splashing down in the water, and then you'd have to reset the piece, I think all the way over on the water side. Oh no, I'm sorry. You'd have to crawl out of the water and get back up again. So this one reset was kind of down here and make you climb back up. Now you'll notice on the board you have these light gray pieces and dark gray spots. Essentially, whenever you landed directly on a dark gray spot, you get another card. So that was the way to pick up cards in this game. The only other feature worth pointing out is Volcar, the giant head here, which is kind of hard to see with the light not being on this side. Basically, what he did was pivoted around, so you could make him go any direction you wanted in order to throw out that fireball, which was just in the back of his head here. And so he can go down the water chute, or he can go down the pathways and knock people out on the approach to him, or basically even toward the end of the game and get people down here. So like when I said, there's generally always a place to hit somebody with a fireball. So you got to be careful when you're strategically doing that, because if you can't hit anyone else, you end up have to hit yourself. So that is basically the features here on the game. It's pretty awesome. I'll give you a quick demo of knocking a guy over. Like I said, I really like the bridges. That was one of my favorite parts here. So if someone's on the bridge, there we go. And then he would have to reset down here and make his way back up to the across the bridge again and toward the dock. So this could be a fun game. It could be a frustrating game, but it's still a great game nonetheless, because it's just got such great dynamic features to it and so much gameplay in it. Kids, adults, everyone will love it. So great classic board game. That is the original 1986 Fireball Island. So let's jump into the 2018 version now. Okay, I told you it was going to be bigger. I mean, it is much taller, maybe about the same width, maybe a little bit longer, but so much more going on here. A lot more gameplay, completely changed. But still has the classic elements. I think the fact that it's bigger is okay. As some of you may know, islands with active volcanoes are constantly growing because the magma branches out and it cools and it expands the size of the island. So after 30 years, perfectly believable, the island's a little bit bigger. So let's get right into it, and I'll give you guys some close-ups, obviously. The gameplay has changed. It's not about just getting the jewel and getting out anymore. You obviously can still get the jewel. But it is about collecting the most points this time. So how do you get points? Getting the jewels worth points. There's other little treasures along the board that you can pick up that are worth points as well. And in this one, you're taking scenographic photos in addition to it. You are a tourist visiting the island. You arrive by helicopter, and this is your way out as well. And there are different scenic locations, like the list of names I read out from the last game, Skeleton Head Beach, etc., that you get pictures of. And when you collect at least 3 of these pictures, you are allowed to return back to the starting position and call the helicopter and cash out. At that point, everyone has 2 turns to get back to the helicopter, or else they don't get credit for any of their points for the photos, just whatever they picked up in the treasure. So you're losing out potentially on a lot of points. So you want to be the first to make it there. Also, the helicopter can become automatically recalled if there's too many events in terms of the activity of the volcano, and I'll get to that in a moment. But that is basically the gameplay this time around. It's not just getting one jewel and getting off, it's getting as many points as you can get and then getting off the island safely. Over here at the front here, this comes out. This is where the peninsula attaches and expands the game even further beyond what I can show you here. And then the Crimson Cutlass would sit off the coast somewhere over here. Everything else is just adding on to the gameplay. You see these, the fireballs have been replaced by these embers, which now could knock you over and they go every which way. And I'll show you little slots up here where the other balls will go in there. But you noticed immediately some of the things they kept the same is they have bridges on here. They have Volcar, obviously. They added other elements like a ladder. This could be knocked over too when you climb. And one of the coolest features are these trees. They don't just look great and add another level to the game, both in terms of gameplay and in terms of design, but they also pivot, allowing you to direct the flow of fireballs. This is something that comes into the gameplay as well, so you can essentially protect yourself or send it towards somebody else. So that kind of creates a new element to the gameplay as well, of a little bit more strategic planning out of where fireballs can go. So a lot more in there, and then you get all these treasures scattered throughout the board, so there's just a lot more stuff to get. So I'll bring you guys in close, I'll show you some of the features, I'll show you the cards, and try to explain a little bit more of the gameplay, which starts to get more and more expansive than just the basic get the jewel and get out. But it's not so crazy that you can't pick it up on the fly really quick. Alright, I'm going to start you out with the cards again. You can see here we have several different cards that sort of mimic the old style gameplay where it's move so many or something happens or look for something or take a card. So they kind of brought those back. We have new ones here. These are from the expansion, the Tiger Pounce, where the tiger would come after you and the bees would come after you. These are called Cataclysm cards. When these got played, you would essentially add them to this tracker up here, and every 3 that you got, another one of these red marbles would come off of this area and end up down here in this little scar area. And basically when you got to 4, that meant the helicopter was coming and then you were running out of gameplay and you had to basically just play to the end. So you had just a couple turns to get to the helicopter, or else nothing you had counted. So you'd only have so much of gameplay. It wouldn't go on infinitely if you collecting things. You would basically have to get out at some point. First person in the helicopter got to draw treasures from this little leftover pot where some were sent during the game, including this lucky penny treasure that's worth 6 points. So you have all sorts of different things there. So you can see there's a lot of cards in this game versus the other one. Here's a nice close-up of the helicopter where the characters would go in. And then you could see the game board here. Now, all these are little treasure pieces. I didn't put them all down on the board. I just wanted to show you guys a few. So you didn't know what they were until you flipped them over. That one fell, but basically you flip them over and they would have different pictures on them. They would have gems or coins, and they would have different value. So it was kind of a blind gameplay until you got essentially what you figured out after you picked it up, and then they were all scored out at the end. You have your pieces here, very similar to the original style, but they're different characters, just colored the same, monochromatic basically. So here's the trees. You can see them rotate different directions, and this piece at the bottom here keeps the fireball from going whatever direction. And then you'll notice little spots on here with squiggly lines. These are for the poisonous venom marbles. So if you had that expansion with the Explorer, you got these little poisonous venoms. There would also be other marks on here for the bees. So the bee tube essentially just got poured down the volcano and it went everywhere. And the way this works, it's not like the other one where you have a marble and it knocks over and hits someone. It's basically like a marble hits a marble, hits marble, hits a marble, and everything just goes chaotic. So you'd have marbles coming down here, knocking the poison venom off, knocking these marbles off. So then you get poisoned, you get fireballed, and all sorts of things could happen this time around. So it's not just a simple getting knocked over sort of gimmick to it. So the other thing you'll notice here are these little spots like this here and here. These are where you would go to get your scenic photos, which kind of look like this. So these scenic photos you collect every time you went to one of these locations. and you would just keep it in your sort of bank of points until the end of the game. And like I said, you had to make it off the game board in order to get that scenic photo. You couldn't just get it for collecting it. So you would have to make it out of the game at the end if you wanted those points. You can only get one per colored area, so you can't get both of these yellows. You get a red, a yellow, and then a blue from this side. The object was to get at least 3. So you get those 3. And you say there's only 3 colors. Well, if you get the expansion, there's 4. There's a 4th color, I think, and then a 5th with the other expansion. So there's more colors you can get as the game expanded. But in the base game, you just needed to get 3 in order to trigger the end game scenario. On top of that, we also got these things called souvenir cards. It makes me think of the Goonies play, if you ever played that from Funko, where they give you like little additional abilities that you could do. So here, roll the boulder, you could throw out spiders, and then you got these little cards that also gave you like a little extra ability as well, in addition to everything else. So these were kind of like ability cards you got that just gave you additional play dynamics into the game and into the late game. So on top of just the cards that allowed movement or it allowed different gameplay, you got those. And then you had these kind of base cards. These were labeled like visas or passports. They just told you how you could move and how things were scored at the end of the game. So it just kind of, everyone took one with their character or the additional treasures that were included in the expansion sets. And you just kind of took those to just keep track of things for the game. But then, of course, there's that jewel at the end. That's only worth about 7 points, so it's not really game-changing like everything else. And Volcar looks a little different here, a lot bigger. And you see what they did with him this time is he doesn't just spit the marble out one direction, he splits it out 3 directions. So throwing it in the top, you don't exactly know where it's going to go, but sometimes you're throwing a whole bunch in so they can go anywhere. And now they have him on this star thing, so he only has limited sort of ways he can go, but he does go exactly in these columns every single time. So you could at least point him in the direction you wanted and then unleash him, and he would do maximum carnage. So it just depends on what you had. And in the expansion sets, they definitely gave you all the ammo you needed to split apart and hit as many targets at once. But then again, you don't really know if you're going to hit yourself or not, so you really had to kind of roll the dice, pardon the pun, and take that chance. Lastly, you see the caves here. They brought those back again. So you have that cave roll system to help you get around the island. You'll see duplicates here. So this time, I think they kind of connected to each other. So you had like 1-to-1, 2-to-2. I don't recall specifically how you had to roll these, but these caves were not like last time where it was just 6 spread around the island. So one would bring you over here to the other one. And then when you added on the Cutlass expansion, I think one of these caves, instead of taking you over there, would take you to the islands, and that's how they got it. Whereas with the Spider Springs, you just went over here, this piece came out, and the other part attached, and then you got all another area of gameplay with a little bridge connecting the two. It also gave you another way off the island. A submarine could pick you up instead of the helicopter, so you could get out that way, and a ton more treasure. But this is the base game compared to the other one. A lot changed, but a lot still stayed the same with a lot of the classic landmarks and some of the functionality of the gameplay. So this segment's about evolution. It's not one-to-one copies, so you could see this definitely evolved from where it was initially as just a game with a singular purpose. Now has multiple purpose and kind of a story to it too. So this is then and now. These are the segments. These are how these things evolved. So why don't I give you a quick shot showing you how it sizes up to the original, and we could do a nice little wrap up. All right, like I said, I would need a ton of desk space just to show you guys these side by side. So I thought maybe if I layer it a little bit, you guys could see how much bigger this is compared to the original. So we have the original here, and you could see the one below it is taller in its structure, and it's just about maybe it's a little bit wider as well. So you could definitely see that these two stacking up here, one is much bigger, a lot more going on, a lot taller, a lot more depth, a lot more gameplay. Everything's kind of changed when in this new version of the game. So that is what we talked about in these segments. We talk about growth, we talk about evolution. It's not a carbon copy of what came before, but it stands on what was built before it and expands into something new and something not I don't want to say better, but just something more. So they took what we have in modern equivalent of board games and added that level of strategy that was missing from the original, giving you more elements of gameplay to do something different than just a singular focus for the game, which was get the jewel and get out. Now we have get the jewel, take some photos, collect some treasures, steer marbles around to thwart your enemies. All sorts of different things you could do on this game. And they made it modular, so you could expand. There are other elements to the game that you could add on, so new areas of play, new dynamics of play with the boulders and the poison snakes and the bees, some more treasures, so something the original didn't have. It was a one and done. Something we have new in the 2010s and beyond is DLC. So this was DLC, it's not downloadable, but buyable content for this game, so you could expand it. So I thought that was kind of cool, where there's expansion elements to it. So this is what Then and Now is about. It's about growth and how things have changed over the years. So we still had this pretty amazing game from the 80s, the late 80s, but now we have this game, which was really inspired by this and did something by taking it to the next level. And that's exactly what it did. Not just, pardon the pun, from the height, but from the expanse of the gameplay as well. It's definitely a huge divergence from the original, but it adds a lot of good things to it. It kept the spirit of Fireball Island, which was fireballing people. But beyond that, it added new elements beyond just one jewel or one treasure, many treasures. You could play against opponents in a different fashion of collecting photos and having poison is now a new status to it. You have souvenirs to give you abilities. So beyond just the cards, and then you have a clock. You have this catechism element where it adds more fireballs to the game and ends the game. So you kind of have to think about weighing the cost and benefits of getting more treasure or getting out with the treasure I have. So all sorts of new aspects to the game that they added, which make the gameplay a lot more exciting, and I think it's great to have. Some of this is still actually available. I've seen the base set still at some Target stores and some Walmarts, so you can still buy this game if you find it out there, and I'm sure it's on Amazon as well. I'll try to find a link to put it in there for you guys, so you can still get the modern version and maybe some of the expansions as well, which I think all of them are worth it. They really add a lot more gameplay and make this a lot more fun for adults as well as children. The original, obviously, you cannot get anymore, and they have not made a one-to-one recreation, although they've made carbon copies of games like Forbidden Bridge. They haven't brought this one back. It's a shame. I think it's a classic. Hopefully Milton Bradley does that. But you could still get this in a secondary market. It's going to cost you a lot. You're looking at $300 to $500, depending on how complete you want it and what condition you want it in. But you really need all the elements. The hardest thing to track down are those glass marbles. A lot of people have replacements in there, not the originals. And I mean, the replacements will work, but I don't think they're glass. I think they're like plastic or resin or something. And there'll be mismatched colors. For me, I like things being the way they were because it just looks better aesthetically, but to each his own. So you could try to track this down in the secondary market. I love it. It's worth it. For me, if I lost it, I would buy it again. But this has been Fireball Island and our Then and Now series. I'm a huge fan of this game, so I'm glad I got to do this and I got to share this with you guys. So hopefully you enjoy this. We have more Then and Now coming up. I'll give you a tease. Our next one is going to be Ninja Turtles related. So we'll be taking a look at those classic Playmates, the originals, not the re-releases in the early 2020s. So we'll look at the original Playmates, and we will be looking at the Super 7 Ultimates, which are the ultimate version of those originals. Not quite the same, but definitely inspired by them and tried to draw those elements into it. Warning, we will be opening a classic Playmates turtle, so if you're squeamish, you might want to avoid it, but we'll be fully going into the packaging and everything on those and opening it as brand new. So tune back for that one soon. And we'll have some new stuff. There's sort of a drought of new products right now, so I'm focusing on some classics while we have some time, but we will be having some new stuff to show you guys soon as well. So as always, like, subscribe, and follow for more content, and we will see you guys soon.